All right. Good morning to those of you on the East Coast. Good morning to also to those of you on the West Coast. I'm your host, Brandon Choi, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. Thanks so much for joining us wherever you are watching from. As I said, it's this morning in many of the places, whether it's here at home or elsewhere. It's morning, but maybe it is evening where you are. So again, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to Emerald Variance, the Loki series chat. As you know, here at Movers and Shakers, every Sunday we like to, dig into the most recent episode of the MCU Marvel series on Disney Plus. And initially, to start the episode, as you know, we like to get into a quick synopsis of the episode, and then later we'll introduce our guest hosts, of which we have always have a cool new guest host to join us, or guest host to join us every week to dissect the episode, go into analysis of the characters, as well as, some Easter eggs and possible theories. But before we do that, as always, I just want to give some quick reminders, some quick minutes, if you will. As always, if you enjoy, much of the content that we do here at Movers and Shakers, make sure that you like and subscribe. Hit that thumb button so you can be notified whenever we go live, of course. And also, if you want to, be a part of the conversation of what happens here live, or even, if you catch the episode later as an archive episode, that you are using that hashtag that we have, Emerald Variant MNSU, or if you so choose, Glorious Green MNSU, for our series Emerald Variants. So without further ado, let's get right into the synopsis on the segment of our show known as Run the File. All right. So previously on Loki, we let me get here real quick. Yes, previously on Loki, we were treated to a brief flashback with the newly revealed female Loki, as we're provided further insight into her enchantment abilities as she attempts to cipher information out of C20 regarding the timekeepers whom she kidnapped, of course. And we flash forward to our 2012 Loki, as he pursues our female Loki back at the TVA and fights her, right at the doorsteps of the timekeepers. However, before they're able to deliver the finishing blows to one another, they're interrupted by Renslayer, who nearly kills or prunes, more on that later, prunes them. However, the 2012 Loki manages to thwart this attempt by transporting himself and the female Loki to an apocalyptic location on her TemPad known as Lamentis. Once there, they soon find themselves stranded there thanks to the reveal of the TemPad being on having a low battery, and as a result, they reluctantly, have to call a truce between one another so that they can avoid becoming additional casualties of the apocalyptic locale. As I said, mentioned just before, that's set to be destroyed. As this alliance plays out, new revelations, I can speak today, or early, guys, revelations are made, such as the female Loki's origins, who we come to know her name to be Sylvie, her respective love life, or to say their respective love lives as Lokis, their disdain for, being vulnerable, and their desire to be able to trust other people that they interact with. As well as a how-to tutorial of how to enchant, which in and of itself helps divulge the secret that the TVA members were all variants, which Sylvie reveals. And as the episode concludes, we're left to ponder the fate of the two Lokis. As one vessel, as one of the vessels that could have provided escape from the Doom Lamentis explodes, leaving both Lokis with the possible realization that they, may potentially die there. So that was our previous episode. Like I said, so much happened in that episode. I know it's a little longer than normal. our normal recaps of the episode that happened before. But in episode 4, known as the Nexus event, we open to a flashback of Asgard as a kid. Presumably, our female Loki, Sylvie, is playing with some toy figures of recognizable characters. Again, more on that later. Soon after, she's apprehended by Renslayer, who at this time is revealed to be a hunter instead of the judge that we, of course, know that she will eventually be destined to be or become. Similar to the moments of the first episode of Loki, we're treated to a montage of Sylvie being processed as a variant, much the way that our 2012 Loki was. However, before she's ultimately judged, she escapes the clutches of Renslayer by using her TemPad. And flash forward to Renslayer, reliving this memory and this failure. We're teased to the timekeepers as she slowly walks upon them after exiting the elevators, which were revealed to be the entrance to to their, I guess you can say, their office, their throne, what have you. And after that encounter, it's revealed that Renslayer went to the timekeepers after again that near descent of the two Lokis, or that near moment of the two Lokis coming upon their location. Additionally, we learn that Mobius, Renslayer, and the TVA at this point have yet to locate the two Lokis following their escape to, as I mentioned before, that apocalyptic locale at Lamentis. However, Mobius resolves to speaking with C-15 to, figure out some clues as to what might have happened to them, who again had been previously kidnapped by Sylvie, but he is again thwarted by Renslayer, who reveals that she is dead due to the side effects of Sylvie's enchantment scrambling her mind. So cut back to Lamentis. Sylvie and our 2012 Loki reflect on what it truly means to be Loki, and in doing so, in opening up to one another and establishing that further connection that they have with one another. An anomaly, it seems to create an anomaly, and it causes a Nexus event, which allows the TVA to pinpoint their location and to snatch them up before Lamentis is destroyed. Once at the TVA, both Lokis are apprehended and separated. However, our 2012 Loki is provided some additional punishment in, a hilarious sequence that involves one of our favorite Asgardians outside of, Loki and Thor being Sif. And as that punishment is, inflicted upon Loki, it happens just after Loki reveals to Mobius that the TVA, can't be trusted and that they are lying to him. So flash forward to Renslayer's office and Mobius inquiring about interrogating Sylvie, to find out, some further information of, what their whereabouts are and perhaps what their, ongoing plans are. He's again has his plan shot down, much to his, suspicion, to Mobius' suspicion, as considering, the many times that he has, tried to, do his job as an analyst, but it seems like, Renslayer is constantly, getting in the way of that. And this is, another example of that. And in passing, B-15 and Sylvie's cell, Mobius, that is, they have an exchange, him and B-15, which alludes to the idea that B-15 is herself also having a growing suspicion about the TVA as well. And so back at 2012 Loki's cell, Mobius once again interrogates Loki to follow up from their prior exchange about him stating that the TVA was lying to him. And in that interrogation, we have some reveals, the idea that that Mobius is able to detect, and I mean we come to this understanding, but it's confirmed here, able to detect that the 2012 Loki has affections and that he cares for Sylvie, our female Loki, and it's also at this moment that Loki reveals in further detail why the TVA is lying to him, because the TVA members, as was revealed to him by Sylvie, are all variants. So in this moment, we cut, we have that exchange where, and again, this is some good acting by Owen Wilson, where he doesn't show his hand, that he's really caught unawares by this reveal. But we have a sneaking suspicion is that he's going to investigate that further. In that moment, we cut to one of his contemporaries with B-15, looking further into her suspicions, as I mentioned prior, based on what the exchange that she had with Mobius regarding Loki. And so she interrogates Sylvie. She goes back to Roxcart that we had a couple of episodes prior, so that way she can privately speak to Sylvie about her suspicions, and it's confirmed to B-15 that in fact her entire life and memories, a lot of it has been she's been lied to by the TVA, because she in fact herself is a variant. Later in the episode, we have a further exchange between Renslayer and Mobius, as they're trying to close the case. And it is in this moment that we're seeing that Mobius is really, feeling kind of uneasy about the TVA, and his suspicions are continuing to grow. So in order to investigate that further, he takes the device from Renslayer's office. And in doing so, when he and looks into what is on the device, he's able to discover that what Loki actually was telling him was in fact true, in a video that reveals the actual whereabouts of, or I should say, what truly happened to C20. So with that said, he goes back to Loki and frees him. However, in that moment, upon returning from getting Loki, he's immediately interrupted by Renslayer yet again, and unfortunately is pruned. And in that moment, Renslayer collects both Lokis, takes them back to the timekeepers, and in doing so, in going to the timekeepers, we also get yet another reveal after a skirmish that happens with the timekeepers. Well, not with the timekeepers. I'm sorry, with the Lokis and the TVA. We get the reveal that the timekeepers are in fact not real, and have been robots this entire time. And in the confusion of that skirmish that we have there between the TVA and the two Lokis, we discover that we get the cliffhanger, I should say, that Renslayer manages to prune our 2012 Loki, but causing us to believe that that he dies in our episode. But in true Marvel fashion, we get we get a scene in the end credits showing us that he was in fact not pruned, but actually transported elsewhere. And he comes upon all of these other variants of Loki. So yes, so much has happened. It's such a loaded episode in comparison to episode 3. And because of that, I'm not going to be alone. As I said, every week I like to have guest hosts to dissect it further. So in doing so, I'd like to introduce my guest host this week. They are the founder and the president of the the awesome custom t-shirt company known as Fright Rags. Let me bring him on, Ben Scrivens. See here we go. Hello, sir. How you doing?
Good, man. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So as I said, man, such a loaded episode. Normally these these summaries or breakdowns of what happened before normally run way more succinctly, but and so much happened. So first off, thanks so much for hopping on and talking about the episode. And then secondly, what were your first initial impressions before we really dig in?
I mean, it was definitely a loaded episode. I mean, episode 3 ended, and my wife and I were like, are they gonna get off this place? Like, we just thought they were, you know what I mean? You just didn't know. Obviously, they were
Right.
gonna figure it out, but then with 4, it's like I love the way this whole series is sort of, I don't want to say changed tone, but each episode, it's different enough where you're like, you just don't know what to expect. So 4 just had so much going on. I mean, when they got Mobius and pruned him, I was like, wait a minute, what? And then they did it with Ravonna, and I was like, wait a minute, or in Selby, and it's like, what's going on here? Like, are they just gonna kill it? And well, obviously Loki at the end. I don't know. It was really. I'm glad I caught the post-credit sequence, because we had looked at a couple prior episodes when it's over. You always try to fast forward, and I don't recall being there and we're like, so I just didn't think there was going to be anything. And then we had clicked off of it, and we just saw in the bottom corner, like, he comes up with the next thing it's going to show on Disney Plus.
Right.
Something we had to like go back to it real quick. So I don't know. It really left me. I loved the episode. It just obviously left me and millions of other people with a lot of questions.
For sure. And speaking on that further, I guess the first thing that I want to dig into to start are those callbacks and those Easter eggs. So one thing in talking about the callbacks that I found interesting is just that idea of just that cyclical nature of the TVA and what has happened with other Lokis. So like in many of the episodes that we've had thus far, we've gotten the indication that this 2012 Loki is particularly unique in his manner, or even Sylvie for that matter, her manner of, or their way of being able to elude the TVA. But we're discovering more and more that perhaps it's not really anything particular about them, is just a Loki thing, because with Renslayer, we were thinking that, okay, Renslayer is this like very accomplished TVA member, and she probably has accomplished everything there is to do in the TVA, and has never really made a mistake, and has never been caught unawares. And lo and behold, in this episode, we find out, like, just like all the other hunters and all the other analysts out there, she has been eluded by a Loki as well, which has been fun to come to the realization of, because up to this point, she's always been kind of that authority figure of kind of I don't want to say talking down to her staff members, but just that idea that she's always been speaking to them in a way as if like what they're doing is such a unexpected thing and is unheard of with the analysts or other members of their team, when she in fact has done it herself. But
plus, she's a favorite of the timekeepers. You know what I mean? She's like one of their favorite. So it's like, how could she do wrong? Yeah.
For sure. But maybe I'm gonna want to get into a couple of others, but perhaps were there some for you that you recognize that perhaps you enjoyed, like whether it's callbacks or Easter eggs?
I mean, Lady Sif was pretty cool to see. I always like when they bring up people from different eras or different movies and stuff. What else? Let's see. It's not maybe an Easter egg, but I love the fact that we keep circling back around this whole jet ski thing for Mobius. And,
right.
And because I know it's going to resolve itself somehow. When I first saw the issue or whatever, the magazine in first or second episode, I remember thinking, oh, they're going to do something with that, because nothing is insignificant in these. Whether it's movies or the TV show, they say something or point at something, and no matter how innocuous it seems, it's going to come up later.
Yes.
Which is great, and I always love that. Obviously, there's stuff like Mobius mentioning like Kree and stuff like that, and it gives you a glimpse into other things. The fact that, you know, does this is this what you, or Loki is what we're destined to lose, and it's a callback to Coulson. He's saying that's what you do, you're destined to lose in Avengers, which is good because that's the 2012 Loki, right? So he's really kind of so rooted back into that one. I mean, honestly, I obviously we're going to talk about this anyway, but the end, the post-credit sequence with showing him like he was in Avengers, but then the people helping him, you know, it's that same shot. Like, they could have done it in other ways, but they decided to mimic that shot from what seems to be that moment, just in a different timeline, because it looks like it's New York.
Right.
And you've got, you know, the three Lokis, and you're like, wait, what now? And, you know, and I, to be completely honest, I had to research them. I knew the main Loki, the classic Loki, but
the kid Loki,
Kid Loki and alligator Loki, like, I don't know who those people are. I mean, obviously I saw him with like a Mjolnir, so that was cool, but I don't know anything about those characters. And I started reading stuff about how Kid Loki could be part of this Young Avengers with the guy from Falcon and Winter Soldier, and
Patriot,
the woman from Ms. Marvel, the girl grew up, you know, from WandaVision. I mean, which is cool. Or Captain Marvel, I should say. She's going to be Ms. Marvel, isn't she?
So far as I know, it's going to be interesting. Yeah, we have a Ms. Marvel show coming, and we'll have her, Spectrum, and Captain Marvel, all three in the same film. Hence awesome. Our name, the Marvels. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. But yeah, so it's just cool. Like, it was, I don't know, like, you know, Disney and Marvel, they how they set things up. So you could just see all these pieces put in place, and you're like, all right, these pieces can go here and go off to this universe. But I'm curious to know, like, where do these people go after they're pruned? And
we're going to get into that. So with that being said, some of the other ones, and that's you know what, the fact that you brought up what that actual shot, I didn't even think of that. You're absolutely right. It's an absolute callback to that last final standoff with the Avengers in that shot. There were some other ones that I saw. So let me see and this is super meta, but I found it funny because it's also a Disney property, is that even in the climax of this episode where we have the Lokis fighting, I was like, man, I'm getting some deja vu of Last Jedi here. That whole moment where they were fighting together against the big bad, or the big villain in that film. And then also just like you said, just that idea of being destined to lose, and the comment being made that no, we're not. Yes, you know, sometimes we lose, but we don't die. We're always survivors. So, you know, that's happened time and time again in the MCU when it's come to, you know, Loki's and how the storylines have played out with, or their narratives have played out. In the Easter eggs, you know, we had Fenris, we had Valkyrie. So like we had those characters, you know, name dropped and appeared, you know, maybe not literally, but as toys, because it's still alluding to, you know, that Norse mythology and those characters that we've already been introduced to in Ragnarok. Let me see. There was also the Sith and Loki encounter. I mean, we haven't seen Sith in like forever, so you know, it was good to, you know, have that return and you know, allude to, you know, highlight that relationship. And then I want to say there was one other thing, also the moment in which they were apprehended. So they've had so many, you know, very unexpected callbacks in different ways, just like you were saying with the moment with the Lokis at the end, where I remember in episode 3, you know, that you had that person on Lamentis that shot them with the shotgun. That, you know, that was like a callback, I felt, of like Coulson, of shooting Loki in Avengers. And even in this one, when they were apprehended from Lamentis, it was a callback to that scene, walking the hallway on the helicarrier. I was like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here. So okay, so I'm not alone. I thought I was like pulling for straws there. I was like, yes. But also, and I guess that would be a because you already commented on the Easter eggs of what we have, of what was alluded to with other characters that they have captured thus far. You know, those being Krees that were name dropped, Titans that were name dropped, vampires that were name dropped. We've already had Krees. We've already been introduced to Titans. But we haven't been introduced to vampires yet. And as we know, we do have a Blade film on the way starring Mahershala Ali. So it gives us a sense also, and this is a hat tip. I can't remember where I saw it, but it also hat tips to or comments on the kind of the power skill too, because in a very slight way, they're commenting and name dropping those different species or races. They're commenting on how formidable they are. And if you're putting vampires in the same breath as like Kree and Titans, okay, they must be pretty formidable in the MCU, or they will be pretty formidable in the MCU. If you're commenting on, well, we've dealt with all these different species. What is it about, you know, Loki's that we're having so much trouble? So, okay, you're saying that they actually are quite formidable and quite dangerous. So that gives me a lot of intrigue regarding when we finally get the introduction of vampires. But were there any last thoughts before we get into kind of like the motives and kind of, you know, character reveals and things of that nature?
I mean, nothing I can think of other than I can't believe there's only like 2 episodes left, right? Is that that's crazy. Yeah. So it's kind of neat. Like, as much as I love the other, I forgot how many episodes WandaVision and Falcon were.
Well, Falcon and Winter Soldier for sure was 6. So 6. Similarly,
okay. All right.
But yeah, WandaVision was definitely longer. Yeah. It was. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, you know, I'm liking the speed at which this is going. Not that I wouldn't care if it was 20 episodes. I would still watch it. But I mean, it feels like it's cooking along. Like, the one thing I will say about when they first announced all of these shows a couple of years ago, I was at a licensing expo and we were at the Disney event, and they had this whole thing. Obviously, it's pre-COVID. This was 2019, and they put up all the logos, and of course, that's, you know, they showed, you know, they tweeted it and put it on posts and stuff. But like all the stuff, and I'm like, this is way too much for me, and there's no way I'm gonna watch it.
No, I remember I was there at San Diego Comic-Con when they had Kevin Feige, and he was there like going over all the shows. So front row. So I will never forget it.
And I'm like, there's no way. I'm like, this is all interesting, but I assumed it was all just going to be dumped on us every season, all episodes at one time for each show. And the way they've been doing it, I've literally watched every episode of WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, and Loki so far. And because it's one a week, it doesn't compete with the other ones on there. It's brilliant. I mean, it's the way TV used to be, and it's coming back to.
Yeah, for sure. And with that being said, I feel like that would be a great segue into variant motives. So in commenting on, and I mean, we alluded to it a bit I should say I alluded to it and you commented on it as well, whether it's from the summary or even from the Easter eggs, just getting into the mindset and the psyche of what's happening with a lot of these characters. Well, Renslayer, I feel like her journey has been, is been interesting in that we get further insight into, you know, how she operates and how where she's coming from in terms of her relationship with Loki. In prior episodes, I've been commenting on how each episode has been someone's episode. And so like the first episode, it seems like has been Loki's episode, and the second episode felt like it was Mobius's episode. The third episode felt like it was Sylvie's episode. And so like this episode seems like it's a combination of two factors. It's a combination of Renslayer's episode, but also of the Timekeepers as well, I feel. in that, you know, they kind of run hand in hand in terms of how they figure into the story. And so talking about her history, like I said, her relationship with Loki's, the fact that it seems like it, even up till now, even though she's a judge and it's long gone and done, and that position is done, she isn't doing it anymore, it still eats away at her that Loki got away got away from her. And you know, a child Loki, you know, at that, not even, you know, an adult Loki. So, you know, that part of it, you know, has been interesting. And then also on the other end of it with Sylvie, the fact that we've seen, you know, even though it's, you know, shown in a humorous way, mind you, we've seen how jarring it is to be, you know, snatched by the TVA, and that process of being like processed as a variant. And to imagine that a child has to go through that versus an adult, and how traumatizing that could be, you know, it says a lot to, you know, where her mindset is and where she is coming from, based on, you know, that idea that, unlike the 2012 Loki, you know, he was snatched, you know, as an adult, or as an adult. Again, you know, they age differently, but for Sylvie, you know, it was quite different. She was quite younger. So there were a couple other things too that were fascinating. But, you know, perhaps were there some, you know, for you that you know, in as the episode progressed, you know, you found, you know, intriguing or fascinating about, you know, certain characters or what was revealed about them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and again, I think a lot of people assumed this early on, but you know, the timekeepers and the fact that they were fake, I always found interesting, because they, you know, they showed where they were, and it's like, okay, that something's a little off about this, and
Yeah.
made it feel like they were real, obviously, of course, and then they were fake. What I can't recall off the top of my head, maybe you know, but does Renslayer know that they're fake? I don't think she does she?
See, that's the thing. Like,
Or is
the
it
thing that's
still
been that's the thing, is that they kind of allude that she's kind of in on what the secret
right? That's
is,
what I thought too.
but at the same time, you know, she still visits them at the top of the episode as if there's still something to be feared from them. So, like, it begs the question: is she just still playing the game of acting as if they're
Mhm.
real, or maybe they are real, but there's still another force acting through them as robots? So, like, she still has the answer to them, but it's
Mhm.
just someone else elsewhere that's working through them.
Well,
So,
that's the other question. It's like, well, then who is pulling the strings, right? Who's behind the
right,
curtain? Because it's not those robots. But you're right. Maybe the entity, whoever it is talking through the robots,
right,
using them like the face, if you will. And maybe she knows that, or maybe she doesn't. That's
exactly.
yeah. I couldn't. Yeah, I didn't make that determination during the episode.
So, I mean, so there's that, and then I guess another thing that's been interesting, and they've been going back and forth with this, just that idea of trust, and that issue with vulnerability that Loki's, I should say, seem to have. So you know, you have that moment where Loki, you know, makes that reveal. You know, I crave attention, but because I don't want to be alone. So just that idea, because even in the last episode, we had, me and the guest that I had that week, we had commented on the fact that it was interesting to talk about what both Lokis revealed when they were on the train. So, like, you know, Sylvie, the 2012 Loki, he commented on, I don't like being on the train going backwards. Like, I don't like to have my back going in that direction. While with Sylvie, you know, she didn't want to have her back to a door. So, you know, that idea that they don't like to be, even though they are, you know, forces of mischief and gods of mischief, they don't like themselves being caught unawares or tricked or being vulnerable, which was really, you know, interesting and fascinating. Um, and then I was going to say, additionally, with Mobius as well, you know, how I would say on in parallel ways, what you have with Renslayer and what you have with Mobius, the idea that for Renslayer, her world is crumbling because, you know, a lot of these things that she's trying to keep under wraps is falling apart. And then in the same way with Mobius, all the things that he's come to know, and even I guess you could say with B-15 as well, all the things that they're coming to, you know, they believe to have known, you know, their entire lives, their entire existence. They're discovering, you know, is crumbling around them, and how they are processing that and dealing with that. You know, it was interesting in how they paced this episode, and that they had those moments in which they were investigating and trying to discover, you know, what the truth is happening parallel to one another for B-15 and for Mobius. But were there any other ones for you before we hop into those theories and what ifs? 'Cause I know you teased them a little earlier.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, in terms of seeing these people, especially Renslayer and who is it? Was it B-15? Is that her name?
Yeah, the hunter.
Yeah. But you're right. Seeing, and even Mobius, like all their realities crashing down, it's very interesting because it mirrors a lot of things even happening in the world now. You know what I mean? Like people's like understanding, like, whoa, things are way different than I ever thought they were, and changing and stuff. So it was an interesting thing to witness happen all in this sort of one episode. And obviously we'll see the aftermath in the next couple, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna hop into theories and what ifs. Pull that up here. So with that being said, for our theories and what ifs, there are quite a few. And in last episode, we were talking about, you know, maybe kind of building off of a theory that was out there existing already, is, you know, maybe Loki is, or I should say Sylvie is enchanting Loki, and Loki enchants her back, and that's how, you know, they're able to escape Lamentus. That has since been debunked based on obviously how the episode played out. However, one thing that the new question that arises, and I'm assuming that they will answer in this episode, is just that idea of what is it about Sylvie? What is it about this Loki that, you know, is such an anomaly, and such, you know, such a part of the puzzle that's not supposed to be there, that it causes a Nexus event? I mean, we get teased to it in this episode where Sylvie asks, you know, just flat out asks Renslayer, you know, what is it? You know, what was the moment that I became, you know, that I caused this Nexus event? And it seemed, and I looked at it a few times, it seemed like Renslayer knows what it is, but she just, you know, kept her cards close to the vest and didn't really reveal what it was. So hopefully we get a hint as to what that is. And I mean, I feel like we kind of get a slight indication that they may address it, because in the episode at the top, Sylvie comments on the idea that the universe wants to break free. Excuse me, I can talk today. Wants to break free so that it can manifest. So it manifests chaos, I should say. And so that idea, that it makes me think of, and I'm going very pop culture here, thinking of Jurassic Park and Malcolm, and him talking about, you know, life finds a way. You know, no matter how much you try to like control things, you know, things can still, you know, spiral into chaos, because that's just not, you know, things aren't meant to be, you know, completely controlled. Things should be allowed just to exist and you know, go their actual path. Which I feel like the series goes into a lot, just that idea of what's truly, you know, destined, and what's something, you know, that idea of free will, and what you can change, and if you can change things. So perhaps we'll get a hint, just in the same way that, you know, a lot of people are commenting on the jet ski with Mobius, that we get, you know, some hints of that, or that they follow through on that bit that they give. And then I guess another thing that was interesting is also Sif, because in that moment, and I guess it kind of plays into the motives portion of what we discussed earlier. that mindset. But also, I guess, comments on what can be expected of Loki going forward is that she says, I hope you know that you deserve to be alone and always will be. So is that highlighting the fact that that up to this point, Loki has always been alone and that he can't trust anybody because, you know, he's not trustworthy? Or even in the episode that we have coming up now with the variant Lokis, can they be trusted? Like, can he only rely on himself versus being able to ally with all these other variants? And just that idea that it's almost a self-fulfilling, it made me think of it as a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, that idea that up to this point, all the times where Loki has, quote unquote, he's failed, there have been times where he truly, he was working in tandem with someone, but he was truly alone, actually, if you really think about it. You know, in Avengers, you know, he was being used as a pawn. So he didn't really have any allies. You know, Thanos was using him as a pawn. So he was, in fact, alone, which is why he failed. However, you know, we've come to know when he allies himself with someone, when he trusts someone, you know, he tends to be more successful. When it was in Thor: The Dark World, when he allied himself with Thor, you know, they were able to be successful. In Ragnarok, when he allied himself, you know, and trusted people, he was able to be successful. So, like, it's been interesting to see, you know, that comment being made, because it really speaks to Loki in and of himself, and how, just as it was commented in the beginning of the episode, I fail sometimes. Maybe the reason you fail sometimes is because you don't trust anyone, and that, you know, you try to, you know, do things on your own. Maybe if you know, learn to trust someone, you have Sylvie here, perhaps in doing so, which is why, you know, you have that Nexus event that happened, is when you know, open yourself up and you allow yourself to be vulnerable and trust, you know, others. You know, you can be a force for good, or you can actually be a formidable force that can, you know, accomplish, you know, great things. So, I know, getting super deep here. But maybe, you know, were there any other theories? There are a couple of others, but, you know, I wanted to see if there were some other ones that you had as well.
I mean, it's funny because I didn't really construct too many theories about what everything is, because I'm so, like, it's so wide open. Like, they can really do anything. Like, you know, at the end of the series, they obviously have to resolve all these things. I'm actually more curious about what characters will remain and continue on in the universe. Obviously, each one of these shows so far has introduced certain characters that you just go, okay, we're going to see them later on. So I'm curious to see who's going to make it and what's going to become of the TVA. Like, what is it? Like, I want to know who's running that thing, and is that still going to be a thing after Loki, or is that going to completely be blown up, dismantled? Obviously, part of this whole deal is for them to just control the multiverse and be able to basically do whatever they want at this point. They can bring, I mean, you know, all the rumors for the, you know, Spider-Man movie with all the different actors coming back and all that, like, they can just blow things wide open at this point. And I feel like this is almost an interesting Nexus event in of itself to sort of spawn those things, even though they've already addressed it in other movies.
Definitely. And I actually have a comment on that to speak on that further, because I absolutely, you know, agree, you know, with that sentiment. Is I know a lot of folks have been talking about, you know, what's the deal with Sylvie and her, you know, her actual alias, or her actual name. And what you're saying, which, and we've been talking about this prior episodes, it plays right into that, because now you allow there to be two Lokis, but you can kind of have your cake and eat it too by having her, you know, get rid of that persona or that identity as Loki, and she can absolutely, you know, take on that mantle of Enchantress. So, like, she doesn't have to go the standard route. And I mean, we've seen it many times in any of the Marvel shows or films. They have sometimes picked, you know, I always like to say Ben and Jerry. They Ben and Jerry some of the origins of some of these characters, and they play with some of the origins that people know. where they don't always follow it to a T. I mean, it still acts within the spirit of that character, but not always following it exactly to the T of their origins. But they always, sometimes throw Easter eggs in there or winks in there to show you that, that they are aware of those other origins. So, I mean, you have that element, which I feel, that she will survive. I don't believe that she won't make it through this series. But in thinking of some other theories, one other thing that I don't think I've heard, a lot of people talk about is what is the deal with, the relationship with the hunters. So B-15 and C-20, like throughout all of these episodes, B-15 seems to be super, concerned about the well-being of C-20. Are you trying to, perhaps it's an indication that maybe they have a relationship and maybe they are variants themselves, and that in their prior life, maybe they were in a relationship. So like, I don't know. Again, going back to what you were talking about of, things seeming pretty small, but actually holding, far more importance and significance than we're in already that we're anticipating. In the same way, I feel like by the end of this series, and I'm jumping far ahead, but by the end of the series, that we get some allusion to many of these TVA members and their former lives, and perhaps them getting to their former lives, returning to their former lives, or if they don't return to their former lives, maybe we see other variants of them living out those lives that they were supposed to have. So like, even if they get pruned out, that maybe, we get kind of like that montage of those characters and the other variants of them living out the lives that they were supposed to live versus them being snatched up.
I like that theory a lot, because they have to resolve Mobius and Renslayer and 115. Like, they have to resolve all the people in the TVA somehow. And you're right. Like, if Mobius stays pruned and for him, for whatever reason, as opposed to Loki, that means it's a permanent thing. But again, he's a variant. So you can always just go, oh no, there at the end, he's riding a jet ski and happily ever after. They can do that with all those people, put him back in a place, and yet the events still happened and he still was pruned, and those things are still real in a way that didn't go back on anything.
Yeah.
Do it.
Or here's another thought, even on the idea of pruned, maybe being pruned sends you to locations that your other variants that were pruned went. So like, I guess in the same way that your Loki, that you have all those Lokis, maybe Mobius went to a location where all these other Mobiuses are, and maybe it could be and it could be a circumstance where like everything comes to a head, where you have armies of these various variants tearing down the TVA because they've been pruned and they somehow find a way back to the TVA. Yeah, crazy stuff. But that would be pretty wild if
that would be crazy.
Yeah. But to your point of what you just talked about earlier, about what could happen by the end as well is, and I brought this theory up in other episodes, but I will double down on this theory or triple down on this theory and say it again, is there's been constant speculation of how Loki would fit into the upcoming Thor film, because all our Thor films have had Loki in it, and with him being gone, how are they going to be able to explain having him in there? And perhaps once he finally gets into a place where either the TVA is dismantled, kind of like what we have in Winter Soldier, where Shield is dismantled, or in a manner in which he manages somehow to reshape the TVA, and because we know that there's going to be a second season, so perhaps
there is.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's one of the few series right now that they actually have a season 2 coming. So knowing that there's going to be continued story and narrative to be told there, that the second season gets into them trying to rebuild the TVA. And in doing so, one of the things that they do, him and Mobius, they do certain things to the timeline, selfishly, for their own reasons. And maybe one of the things that Loki does is that he intervenes into the events of Love and Thunder. So I don't know if you're aware of who the villain is in Love and Thunder. I'm assuming you are, maybe not.
Actually, I don't. I haven't been reading up about it.
So for Love and Thunder, the villain will be none other than Gore the God Butcher. So played by Christian Bale, played by Batman himself. So by having Gore the God Butcher in there, and those of you that know his ties in the comics, know how formidable a character he is. Perhaps in the sacred timeline, or the timeline that is supposed to happen, maybe Thor doesn't make it out of it. Maybe that's why we have another Thor in there that's making an appearance, because he's not supposed to make it out of it. And in doing so, Loki creates another branch timeline by having two Thors around in one timeline versus just the one. Because we have a mighty Thor, Natalie Portman is coming back as another Thor. So by having that in there, you have a way to not only make the show, pivotal to Love and Thunder, it also provides, a story thread between Love and Thunder and that Loki series. So, but yeah, we'll see what happens with it. But that has been a theory that I've come up with, where it's like, I wonder how they're going to try to make that, be relevant to that movie, and also just for casual audiences, explain how there could be two Thors around and why that would make sense. So, but perhaps there, before we, head off, Ben, were there any other theories, some hopes, or even just final thoughts on this most recent episode, the Nexus event?
I just feel like, in terms of what we've seen so far between WandaVision, Falcon Winter Soldier, and Loki was the one I was least looking forward to, in the sense that I love Loki. I love Tom Hiddleston. I think his performances are amazing. But
yeah,
I grew up a Marvel kid, and I never really got into Thor or Loki or that side of things. I wasn't really like the cosmic stuff as much as I was like Spider-Man, Iron Man,
the grounded stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it isn't to say I didn't like them. I just didn't gravitate toward it. So it was one of those things where I was like, okay, and again, like I said before, we'll watch it because it's the only thing on and whatever, in terms of those things. But I feel like it's so far the most important to the next phase or whatever you have with Marvel, that I feel like of the three so far, this has been the most important to everything else. Like, I absolutely love Falcon and Winter Soldier, and the fact that they wrapped up a lot of loose ends between those two characters. And then, of course, seeing Falcon as Captain America was like amazing, especially because he looked like he did in the comics. So like, that was already like awesome, like an incredible climax to what we already started in the movies. But it felt good because it resolved it. And then you had the introduction of US Agent and Valentina and all that. So that you're setting things up, but it didn't feel like you're just setting up a pillar on one side, whereas I feel like Loki could be kind of exploding things, setting up multiple types of things, you know what I mean? Even WandaVision, it left it sort of open-ended a little bit at the end, but you could see where now she's resolved something in her life so she can move forward. Loki, it's not about resolution. Well, it might be, but not as much as is it about just boom, exploding it up into multiple possibilities. So to me, I'm like, wow, this is important. You know what I mean? Like, in terms of the universe,
far more important than we probably gave it, credit for. And to speak further to that too, I guess it's been in seeing all the MCU shows thus far. It's typically been a trend that I'm noticing, is that they build and build very well, but it seems like sometimes, in some instances, either it feels like the ending is a little rushed, because they've established so many interesting and intriguing, threads and things that are left hanging, that I feel like in doing these shows, and again, this is, the first round of shows that it provides. I think it's providing an interesting challenge in pacing these shows, because with the movie, like, you have your story, but you can still provide, some threads going forward, but it's still a kind of a succinct story. But with these shows, it still is providing them, it seems like a challenge in terms of wrapping them up, because in thinking of the prior shows, like with WandaVision, I feel like there were so many, interesting threads that were established, and I feel like if there were fewer threads that were covered, it would have felt like a story that ended in and of itself. However, among, at least out of the two shows thus far, I feel like that execution happened better. And with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because they had the challenge of only doing 6 episodes. And again, there are other mitigating circumstances, the pandemic, other things like that, understandably, that in having 6 episodes, it caused them to condense a lot of story and a lot of character, that it seemed like they got to the finish line far sooner than I would have liked, and I would have preferred. And then this is rare, and I've mentioned it, is I feel like that series could have benefited from 2 additional episodes. Like, it felt like it was setting up, and then by the time you got to the last episodes, boom, like you were rushing to the end. And hopefully, in terms of that pacing component, we don't get that with our last 2 episodes here with Loki. However, again, they also have the luxury of doing a second season, which the other shows didn't have, which plays again into that idea of pacing, because you know that you'll be able to return and continue those threads versus trying to conclude them quickly. And then I was going to say, lastly, with this show, I feel like it also has a nice luxury as well, in that you have a show that, unlike the other ones, the other ones kind of have to weave within the narrative of the movie, but because you're dealing with variance with this series, there are going to be moments where you're weaving into the story, but there's an opportunity to do absolutely, just like you said, whatever you want, because you're dealing with variance, and it doesn't ever have to touch the main storyline if they don't want it to. It could go crazy in any other direction, in any other timeline that they want, that has that I guess in a way you can say won't have any repercussions in some cases to the main storyline, because they can intervene into making sure that something that potentially branches off into a Nexus event gets prevented. Or if it's something, as we've discovered in the show, that has that loophole of being, an apocalyptic event, they don't have to worry about, that intervening, and they can, introduce a whole bunch of things, different characters, different, species, races. I mean, they've, indicated vampires and all these other, creatures out there. So, they could always do that and not really have it have any implications, but just to have fun with, that idea and having them in the show. So, but with that being said, Ben, thank you so much, man. Getting up early this morning, and gosh, I didn't even say this, guys. Happy 4th of July. But before I let you go, can you tell folks where they can find you?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It's always fun talking about this stuff. And you can catch me anywhere online. Instagram and Twitter. It's that handle below at Fright Rags. And of course, our website is www.fright-rags.com. And check us out. We've always got new releases coming up every week. And lots of good stuff coming.
All right. Awesome. So with that being said, guys, I am your host, Brandon Troy, host and co-creator, of course, of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. You can find me on Twitter, as you can see down below, on Brandon Troy ENT on Twitter and Brandon Troy _ENT on Instagram. You can find us also at Movers and Shakers Unlimited on Instagram, and Move and Shake UNLTD on Twitter. So with that being said, guys, thanks so much for watching. Be safe out there, and see you soon. Bye.